Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm excited to be here to moderate our faculty panel today. My name is Alix Schroder, and I'm the Associate Director of Academic Initiatives at the Columbia Climate School. And I'm going to start off with introducing our wonderful faculty panel today. So I'm going to start directly here on my left, Dr. Andrew Robertson. So Dr. Andrew Robertson is a senior research scientist and heads the International Research for Climate and Society Climate Group, so that's the IRI. He is an adjunct professor in Columbia Climate School, where he teaches in the Regional Climate and Climate Impacts course. He brings over 30 years of experience in topics ranging from mid-latitude meteorology, coupled ocean-atmosphere climate dynamics, sub-seasonal and seasonal forecasting, downscaling, and tailoring of climate information for use in conjunction with sectoral models for climate adaptation and risk management. He has taught in capacity building training courses around the world. Then we have Dr. Mingfeng Ting. Dr. Ting currently serves as the Lamont Research Professor in Ocean and Climate Physics, as well as the Adjunct Professor of Earth and Environmental Sciences and the Co-Senior Director of Education at the Columbia Climate School. She is also the co-director of the MA Climate and Society program, and her research spans a broad range of topics in the climate sciences, including Asian monsoon variability and change, droughts and heat wave mechanisms, and the Atlantic multi-decadal variability and impact, polar lower latitude interactions, and tropical cyclones. Next, we have Dr. Melissa Lott. Dr. Lott is a senior research scholar and the director of research at the Center for Global Energy Policy, CGEP, where she co-leads the Power Sector and Renewables Research Initiative and serves as the acting director of the Carbon Tech Development Initiative. She has worked as an engineer and advisor for nearly 20 years in the United States, Europe, and Asia. While her work has spanned the entire energy system, Dr. Lott is internationally recognized for her work in the electricity and transportation sectors, for her research and contributions to global energy sector dialogues. Dr. Lott specializes in technology and policy research and will be teaching the Climate Change Mitigation course in the fall 2023 semester. Next, we have Dr. Lisa Dale. Dr. Dale is the co-director of the Undergraduate Program in Sustainable Development. With a background in political science, her courses include environmental policy and governance, challenges of sustainable development, public lands in the American West, climate change, adaptation and resilience, science communication, and qualitative research methods for sustainable development. Her research on environmental policy focuses on climate change adaptation in two distinct landscapes: rural agricultural communities in Sub-Saharan Africa and federally managed public lands across the American West. Dr. Dale will be teaching the Climate Change Adaptation course in the fall 2023 semester. And last but not least, we have Jeffrey Schlegelmelch. He is the director of the National Center for Disaster Preparedness at Columbia Climate School. In this role, he oversees the operations and strategic planning for the center. He also oversees projects related to the practice and policy of disaster preparedness. His areas of expertise include public health preparedness, community resilience, and the integration of private and public sector capabilities. He is joining us today as the chief architect of the newly launched specialization in disaster risk management and the instructor of the elective course, Climate Change and Disaster Management. The chief architect, I know.
Can I get that on a card?
Yes, that can be on your name tag. So as you can see, we have a really, really incredible panel of experts in a diversity of topics and subjects. And so we're going to dive right into our panel questions for the day, and I'm just going to kind of have you each answer directly in a line to make it easy. So our first question today is, how does your practice, your research and practice, inform the courses that you teach? And Andrew, we'll start with you.
Is that working? Can you hear me? So hi everyone, welcome, yeah. So as introduced, I work at the IRI, which is up in Palisades, and I guess you get the chance to go and visit this afternoon. So it's a beautiful day. I hope you enjoy coming up there. So that's where I have my office, and the IRI is really where this program originated. So the institute was formed after big breakthroughs in climate science in the 1980s with the prediction of El Nino sudden oscillation. And that was actually some breakthroughs that happened at Columbia scientists. And it was shown that you were able to predict weeks to months ahead how the climate would evolve, especially in the tropical regions. So Noah had the idea that, well, you know, this is information that should be brought to societal use. You know, can it help farmers better manage floods and droughts? Can it help inform, you know, when they should plant their crops, things like that? So the institute was really founded as a kind of with a really practical mission. How can you bring these new research breakthroughs to the benefit of society? So, you know, the IRI at the time was called the International Research Institute for Climate Prediction, but it soon changed its name to the International Research Institute for Climate and Society. So what I do is I'm on the climate side. I'm heading up all of these predictions that we make, and we make them routinely every month for the upcoming seasons. But what we also do, and my work involves, you know, well, how do you make that actionable? How do you make that information so that it can help people and communities around the world, especially in developing countries, build resilience to a changing climate? So it involves both making these forecasts, but also interacting with people in Africa, Met services in Africa, helping them to improve their forecasting so that they can then help people in their countries with, you know, through agricultural extension, through the various linkages they have with their users to help people really, you know, become more resilient. Extremes are increasing, so how can people really better manage these climate risks? So there's a lot of that. I teach the regional class, which is now in the spring, and we try to bring a lot of that practice into what you all will be learning if you come. Toward, okay, so there's the science out there, but how can we make that actionable? So learning about the scientific principles, but also the methodologies, using, you know, quant methods and so on and so forth, to actually make those forecasts something that are tailored specifically, something like maybe to the onset of the rainy season, and formatted in a way that people can, a farmer can really, or, you know, an agricultural extension agent can really help act on it. So I guess I'd emphasize that, you know, science to practice, and really a practice-based approach, and how, you know, some of your professors here will have that experience of actually not only on the academic side, I mean, they have the academics, but then also on the practice side, on how do you know, sometimes it's called the fourth purpose of the university, is what Columbia is trying to promote in the climate school. And, you know, we really we put that into practice, and I think you can learn, you know, from people who've been doing this for a long time. So the IRI has been doing this for 25 years. I've been teaching the program I've been at the IRI for almost 20 years. So you get to you know, really learn from that experience. I've probably gone on enough now. Thank you. Thank you.
That's great.
Oh, you have already.
Hello. So this is working.
Yes.
Thanks, Andy. Actually, that's a great introduction. I was going to say the same thing. You know, this program is created as sort of like, you know, applying what the breakthroughs that you were mentioning, the ENSO prediction or climate change research, you know, directly into applications and how that affects society. So that's, you know, obviously the design of the original program. And all of us teaching in the program, as you kind of see the you know, subset of the instructors in the program, are all doing active research or practice in the real world. So I think this is a very different program in that sense, that everyone who's involved in teaching the program are at the, you know, cutting edge of what they do. So I would say one of the biggest thing for me in terms of teaching in the program, I actually I taught for the past is it 19 years? I think 19 years of the program, quant methods that a lot of students were mentioning. I think one of them probably most challenging in terms of sort of the quant side of things. But I'm going to actually changing to teach. When you guys come, I'll be teaching dynamics of climate and climate change. So slight change, but it's all very much linked to what I do. So I'm a climate scientist. I've been doing research in all wide spectrum of climate problems, from ENSO dynamics, from the very beginning of my PhD years in the 80s, mid 80s, and then starting to expand more into sort of understanding natural variability and how that can be distinguished from the climate change and what signals we can detect in the phenomena due to anthropogenic caused climate change. So a lot of that will be part of my teaching as well. So I bring in pretty much what I do into the classroom almost immediately. So one of the things that's different from climate science, or maybe some other science too, but particularly for me, I'm very aware, is that things are changing on a daily basis, all the time. So you really bring in things that's happening now. This year there's California having all these flood events, and all of us are being tapped into talk to the media about what's going on in the real world. So those are the things that we immediately bring into the classroom. I think that is really what I see the most important, is to immediately you are exposed to things that we breakthroughs as well, the research breakthroughs in the field. I would say also the other thing that impacts my teaching practice is I heard a little bit of the student panel earlier, and everyone's talking about group projects, and we love group projects because as researchers you don't really, some people may work alone, but a lot of us work in groups. We all bring in different perspectives into the research project we work on. We have students, graduate students, PhD students, postdocs. We have people in slightly different discipline. Andy and I, we're both climate scientists, but we bring in slightly different perspective. So we love for the students to work in a group as well, because here you have very diverse backgrounds. So you really bring in different kind of perspective. So that is one of the things we encourage students to do all the time. So really through, working together, solving problems together, and learn from each other.
So when it comes to the work that I do, I focus mostly on the solutions to climate change. So we have to adapt to the changes we're already seeing and will continue to see as we try to bend that curve, right? Bring down emissions. So what are the solutions we have in front of us? I have all the degrees you could want, I think, and probably more in engineering. I also have degrees in policy, and I work with policy and other decision makers in my everyday. So in addition to working here at Columbia, I work with the United Nations as an advisor to the Secretary General on something called the Council of Engineers for the Energy Transition. And I also work as an advisor to some of the expert groups at the World Economic Forum. And actually, a lot of those big meetings happen in the middle of fall semester. And what we do as a group and a team in that class is we say, okay, we're going to break down where emissions are coming from, what the sources of them are, and look holistically at how you transition a society to net zero, acknowledging that, yes, there are technical challenges, but actually some of the biggest ones and the most challenging ones are non-technical. So it's how do we actually get stuff built, permit things, create regulations, actually set targets? How do we think about community engagement and community priorities? Because you know what? The things that are okay for me may not be okay for you. Your weighting of your priorities may be very different. So we lean into that head on. And we talk about the different geographies in which this transition is occurring. We talk about low, middle, high income countries, of which there's a huge diversity just amongst each of those groups. To generalize them by size or by per capita income, that doesn't give you the richness that you need. So as the course goes on, what we do is we step through, as you said, I study the whole energy system. So we step through industry, transportation, power and electricity and power plants, buildings. We go into nature-based solutions around agriculture, and we say, what are the tools we have? And then we go into case studies of different regions of the world. And within that, we're able to bring in, so I do my own research. It focuses predominantly on how we maximize health in the transition, so how we have the healthiest communities going forward. But I lead a team of 65 researchers on campus. We have partnerships with parts of campus all over, professors across all the different departments. And we bring in people to say, okay, we're going to do a case study on the UK or on Mexico or on China. And we pull in experts who study the policy there, who study
all different aspects of that country's society. And we say, okay, let's talk through the practical things and let's get into a discussion. So by design, the class is not as big as it could be. We're going to have multiple sections next year so that we can really have those in-depth discussions. And so you're not just hearing from me what policies Chile has implemented. You're going to have Juan Carlos Jobet come in, who's here on campus for a couple of years, who was the energy and mining minister in Chile before he came here. And you're going to learn from him about how things actually work. So we'll go through the summary of how it all works, and then we'll say, okay, Juan Carlos, you lived it. Talk us through it. And that is a tremendous resource that we have on campus, having access to all these experts. The other thing that we'll do is, because we'll just be coming off of with Climate Week and a bunch of the summer meetings, is we'll actually integrate what's happened in those meetings into the conversation. Because as Ming-Feng said, things are changing really rapidly. And so having that be part of the conversation, not having a stagnant conversation that was absolutely cutting edge 10 years ago, but talking about what's happening right now in a quick changing world is really important.
Thanks. Hi there. Good afternoon or good morning. I'm Lisa Dale. I am a political scientist, so in the climate and society equation, I'm on the society side. And I study policy, environmental policy, and global development policy, sustainable development in particular. And my own research takes place in two very different settings. I study climate change adaptation in general, which is the ways that society is adapting to living in a different climate. We built civilization in the old climate, and now we've got a new one, and we only partially understand what that's going to look like going forward. How can we modify society and our policies and our programs to be maximally adaptive and benefit the most number of people as we navigate this transition? I'm always particularly interested in some of those dynamics in the developing world and on poverty. So one of the places I study is in Rwanda. I actually just got back. I brought a group of students with me there for spring break. And I study rural life and rural resettlement in Rwanda. And so my research is what kind of policies the government is creating, how those policies are then implemented, and I'm interested in the perspective on the ground. What is the perspective from the people who've been resettled? And so my research has gone to some villages and spoken to people and try to understand how intent of the policy is or is not being manifest in the actual world. The other place where I study some dynamics around climate change adaptation is here in the US. I lived out west most of my life, and so I have a history of working in the policy sphere in politics in Colorado, and I worked a lot on wildfire and wildfire policy and public lands, endangered species, and land use, forestry. And my research now has continued on wildfire policy. And I've been studying wildfire policy for decades. And when I started studying wildfire policy, it wasn't a climate change conversation, and it is now. The pace, the number, the seasonality, the destructiveness of wildfires is now tied to larger processes associated with climate change. So now when we think about policies intended to reduce risk to communities from wildfire, we're also talking about climate change adaptation. And it gives us some different analytical tools to make sense of the policies and their impacts and what they're intended to achieve. So I'm really excited to be coming into this program in the fall, just like many of you will be, and I'll be teaching the climate change adaptation class in the fall. I teach it now. I just wrote a book on the subject, and I teach the class to undergraduates. I've been teaching it to undergrads for about 6 years, but I'm going to be modifying it for you, and we'll be exploring the topic together in the fall through a case study approach, which sounds very in line with what Dr. Lott will be doing, and we'll look at how different types of communities in different settings are navigating a wide range of policies from different layers of government that are intended to help them adapt to climate change, and how well those policies are working and what we might be learning going forward. Thanks.
Hey, everyone. So disaster science, a lot like climate science, I think really sort of speaks to the need for programs like this Climate and Society program, because, we're traditionally, taught science in a very deterministic way. It's true or false. There's A, B, C, or D. There's always a right answer, and it's a single branch of science. And with disaster science and broader climate science, I think bring three distinctly different dynamics. One is that it's inherently intersectional and chaotic, which means that, we're not looking at a single branch of science. We might look at engineering for things like seawalls, but how those seawalls are deployed could erode social cohesion and social resilience, depending on where they're placed. And they're layered in on assumptions on what types of tsunami or what are they protecting against. And so all of these things have different contextual dependencies. And so it's not always, it's actually never a one-size-fits-all type of scenario. The second is that the evidence base is a work in progress. We don't have all the science to answer all the questions that we have. But that gets us into the third question, which is we don't have time to collect all the data, to get all the answers to the level of certainty that we would before maybe publishing that mathematics proof. And I'm not throwing shade at mathematics. All respect, we use math. Right, so there's this applied nature and this sense of urgency, and so we have to work to develop solutions that are as well informed as possible by multiple branches of science, while also constructing them in a way that they can change as we learn more, and that we're better able to create systems that are sensitive to community dynamics and are sensitive to all these different changes. And just how that applies in the classroom, I'll give sort of two quick examples. So the students in one of the classes I teach right now, Climate Change and Disaster Management, are doing we cover each week sort of a different area of disaster science, and they're doing these group negotiations where essentially they're taking two different sides of an issue for a disaster resilience initiative and working towards different value systems and trying to come together towards a common kind of win-win scenario. And for the midterms and the final project, we look at a single resilience initiative that's up to the students to determine what that is, and then it has to be essentially create value propositions for three different stakeholders in the community that they're defining: businesses, individuals, legislators. So it may have benefits across all these different groups, but I can get a room full of people and say, hey, preparedness is a good idea, right? And everyone will nod their heads. But then they'll go back and say, okay, you have to make some sacrifices to do this. Whoa, how much am I going to get out of it? How many more votes am I going to get? How is this going to affect this and that? So it's also just trying to better take into account and build skills for not only understanding the underlying science, but being able to navigate these different dynamics to be able to bring more people to the table towards addressing that third piece of the urgency and the need to find solutions and find interim solutions as we learn more and create more solutions along the way.
Wonderful. Okay, let's move on to our next question. So all of our climate and society courses really offer a unique access to the faculty and academic and professional opportunities at the school. So I'm hoping that each of you can speak a little bit to what kinds of interactions do you have with the students in your courses or as a program leader, and what opportunities do students have to engage in research or practice with you? So we'll start with you, Andy.
Okay. Yes, so as I mentioned, IRI is all about putting climate science into practice, and so we have all of these projects. A lot of the work is project-based around the world, especially in Africa at the moment. We have a lot of projects, so there's the opportunities to be involved directly in that work through, GRA or internships and so on and so forth. So, that's the interactions I've had with students in the program in previous years have been on, helping us actually with the projects that we do. So I think you get to you get to have the opportunity to work alongside people who are actually doing this work.
Yeah. So since I serve many roles, obviously there are a lot of interaction directly with students. Like Andy said, a lot of class projects that I know, particularly like final projects, I almost, I meet every group and talk through them, their research topic in that sense. But also, I, as director of the co-director of the program, I have hold office hours to meet everyone. And so, whenever students wanted to meet me, there's a lot of interaction. And particularly, I find students come to me probably because I'm a climate scientist, so they often come to me for advice in terms of, if they wanted to pursue PhD studies, wanted to gain research experience, what can they do, and what field would be a good fit for them. So a lot of those kind of conversation happening all the time. And all of us actually, the core faculty members are all assigned advisees. So that, to itself is, we have, each of us have like 10 or so students that we are, supposed to be meeting on a regular basis. So again, that's another way of faculty-students interaction. But in terms of research, yes, I've served, as you already heard, there's the GRA or now DRA, I think that's Departmental Research Assistant rather than Graduate Research Assistant. It's the same thing. So I've served as a supervisor for some of our students who talked to me about my research and wanted to work with me on some of the topics. So I've published a paper with our students in the past. So lots and lots of opportunities for this kind of faculty-students interaction.
So I'll put it into 3 buckets. So there's the stuff associated with the class and teaching. There's direct opportunities with me, and then there's direct opportunities within the Center on Global Energy Policy where I work. So the first one is pretty straightforward, what you probably would expect. So I'm in class every week, except for during COP, the Conference of the Parties, in which case I try to dial in, and we have a guest lecture, and then we talk about COP the week when I come back, because I fly back from COP and I teach the next day. So it's fresh on mind. And I'm also very caffeinated because of the time changes. There's office hours, which are just your time. You come by and you talk about whatever it is. If you've got a question from class, cool. You got a question related to something more broadly about the topic, great. Professional development, great. It's just time that is set aside specifically for the students in my class. They're in addition to office hours I have for all of my former students, because even after you're not actively in my class, you're part of the community. You're people that I expect to work with for the rest of my career in different ways. We're gonna go into different parts of this ecosystem. You will be surprised how small it feels, or maybe you won't. You think it's a big world, but actually it's really small in a lot of ways. So there's just space at a time for that as well. The second bucket, working directly with me. So on my team, we have researchers who are directly in my office on topics that I personally do research on. So that's mostly around energy, climate, and health. So that's the public health piece about it. We currently have 4 students working directly in our office. We can have more. They're predominantly master's students. There's 1 PhD and there's 1 undergrad as well that I didn't count in those 4, so it's just the 4 master's students. And you are directly working with me and with other researchers in my group. So Harry, who's here, is one of them. He's finished his PhD. He's a full-time researcher with us, and you're working with us on projects that are aligned with your interests. And by that, I don't mean something you're already an expert in, though maybe you are, and that's fantastic. It's also stuff that you just want to learn more about and you want to get exposure to. There's a lot of different places for you to plug in. And then the third bucket, which is interacting more with the team of 100 people that are at the Center on Global Energy Policy and then within our broader networks. So all those guest lectures that come in, very often they end up with students from my class working with them later. I want to work on industry. I want to work on Latin American issues. I want to work on whatever it is that you're interested in. Within that, at the center, we have just over 80 students working with us right now. Again, the vast majority are master's students. They don't just do research, they also work with our communications teams and our publications teams and our events teams, because there's all different ways that we each bring value and that you want to develop your career, and there's different opportunities for you within the center to work on those topics. So those are just some of the opportunities for engagement.
This incoming class and this program in general has so many opportunities across this campus. It kind of blows my mind sometimes. Like, I'm on the weekly list and, I get the weekly newsletter and it's like internships and research assistantships and teaching assistantships and short-term jobs and long-term jobs and career opportunities and entry-level access. I mean, it is deep and wide, and being here in New York is also a really helpful place to be because there's just so much happening here. So even just outside of me and my own work, I want to assure you that if you end up coming here to study, finding opportunities to contribute to this work is not going to be your problem. You're going to have the problem of deciding where to devote your time. Like you've heard, I always take on research assistants. Those positions are usually posted in a centralized way. And so you'll have access to each semester a list of research opportunities, and you can apply to individual opportunities. And so we all sort of, it's streamlined and structured and standardized in that way. It makes it easier for you all to find opportunities, makes it easier for us to find helpers, and that seems to work pretty well. And also, sort of limits the time you have to worry about it because it'll be posted and you'll have a coordinated time to apply to several. I'll add one more thing, because I think you've heard a lot of good ideas about contributing to research, which is contributing to teaching. And I teach mostly undergraduates, so this class will be a bit different. And in all of my undergraduate classes, I use teaching assistants. I hire TAs. And so most of my TAs come from the Climate and Society program. So even though I've been teaching undergrads for the last few years, I've been working pretty closely with Climate and Society students who work with me. Some of you may have ambitions of going on to do a PhD or to work in a higher education setting and want some experience teaching. Some of you may like working with undergraduates or be interested in sharing and contributing your knowledge in a field to people who are new to it. And so working as teaching assistants is another opportunity that you'll have across the university, not just here in this program, but to contribute across campus. So I'll just echo also, I will be doing a lot of advising. I have regular office hours, and really my favorite time to interact with students is casually. And we get to pass each other in the hallway and chat before class and walk out together and have a conversation, and maybe you'll come by my office hours, and all of those opportunities that really went away during the pandemic and are back now. I value so much the ways that we just get to sort of operate and work together in all kinds of informal ways. So don't discount those.
Yeah, I mean, along the same lines, I mean, we have a lot of work going on with the center, and we, at any given time, have a dozen or so students who are helping out with that. And, you know, the vast majority of our work is not research at the center. It's translation of research, and it's more practice and policy oriented. So we have a couple of amazing students who are doing some work doing policy research and looking at state by state what types of climate legislation, climate adaptation legislation is being done, and they're co-authors on a report that we recently released. We're actually onboarding some students right now for a project we're doing with this city, looking at doing an after-action process on surge staffing for healthcare during the pandemic. What processes worked well, what didn't, what could have changed, how they affected. So this is like real-world kind of work that we're doing here. That's going directly to policymakers, that's going directly to folks in the field with opportunities to do that. I always say too, whenever we work with students too, I benefited from doing work that when I went to job interviews, I could hand them what I did rather than just talk about it. And so having an output, having that line. But the other thing I'd say too is that, you know, in the way the courses are being designed and how we're really looking at, I mean, I don't want to speak on behalf of everyone, but certainly for the disaster risk management, and I'm sure across all of them, is that there's also a lot of room for your ideas, what you're passionate about working on. And for a lot of these resilience initiatives that I mentioned, there's a reason I don't select them, and it's not completely because I'm too lazy to come up with them for everyone. But there's other benefits, and that's being that you have ideas, things that you're interested in. You know, with one of my classes, I ask at the beginning, what's your interest in disasters, and how do you see this playing into your career? And about 2/3, the answer is, I don't know, but it seems really important. Well, that's great. That's what we want, because there's trainings for people to be emergency managers, and then there's all the people around them who work in finance, who work in humanitarian sector, who work in government, who work in non-government institutions, who intersect with how we manage disasters as a civil society. And I think that that's one of the things that this program really offers, is a lot of expertise to be able to take into a variety of different fields to better interact and better contribute to this. And so providing opportunities inside and outside the classroom for that experience, but also to incubate some of these ideas that you have and initiatives that you're passionate about, I think is also something that is a nice fit within a program like this.
Great. Thank you all so much for sharing about your classes and your thoughts. That was fantastic. We are going to open up for questions. And so we have, I think as the last section, we have two folks here with microphones. So you can go ahead and raise your hand if you have questions.
Ask us anything. We are here
Yes.
for the next while.
Okay. Question regarding, and I guess to anyone in the panel, but regarding the topic of climate being a global problem and requiring everyone across the globe to really play a role, and some nations playing more of a leader role versus others. How do you see the Middle East's role in climate change, and are there any initiatives that the research you're doing, especially because COP's going to be held this year in Dubai, What are your thoughts on that, and what else could Columbia be doing in that regard, given its leadership role that it plays today as a climate school?
I think that one's for me. So we'll go with that. So when it comes to, so I don't know if y'all are familiar with Columbia's global centers. Just as one comment I'll make, we have 10 global centers around the world. Has this come up in the discussion already today?
No, I'm so glad you're here to talk about it. Yeah, it came up earlier. Yeah.
So when it comes to our global centers, we have 10 around the world. We're establishing our 11th. We have 2 in the region where we have staff that are actually there 365 days of the year, minus travel when they're traveling around. I will also say that multiple departments around campus, we have researchers and staff who are located there, including the Center on Global Energy Policy, and then people who travel to the region. So when we talk about climate change solutions, we are talking about, again, all the different parts of the spectrum when it comes to that. So suppliers, so exporters, importers, suppliers of today's energy resources, suppliers of the future energy resources, things we're trying to transition to. When we talk about policy, we have to talk about these big international meetings, their role, what they're actually doing in terms of impacting and influencing conversations, what the results have been, the big impacts of those, et cetera, et cetera. So what we do is we have a MENA region, Middle East, North Africa region group within the Center on Global Energy Policy, and I bring in one of the leads of that, and we talk it through. Karen Young has been working out of DC, so she's American, working with different partners in the Middle East through the Middle Eastern Institute and other organizations. She teaches for the State Department, their Foreign Service Institute they have that trains their foreign service officers, but you can look up Karen Young at the center and read about her background. It's really impressive. She leads our team in saying, what are the biggest questions that we need to face head on? Columbia University, both here in New York, but with our global centers, can provide and does provide a foundation, a trusted, independent platform for conversations that are really sticky and tough. We're a university. I make no more money if a solar panel is sold or a barrel of oil is sold or something else. Doesn't affect my paycheck. All of us are able to come there as independent brokers of a conversation and say, let's create a dialogue here. Let's get the right people at a table and actually have that conversation and see where we can break through some of the stickiest parts of that conversation. I would say another part of the conversation is just developing, I'm talking about Southern Hemisphere, low-income countries, the nations that have contributed least to climate change but are actually being impacted the worst by it. How do we actually have that conversation of energy for development while not being in complete tension with climate? That's a really good conversation, and it's one we have through our Energy Opportunity Lab and a few other initiatives. So we have scholars, and I didn't highlight it earlier perhaps, but we have scholars all over the world. So the majority, the highest concentration is in New York. Every one of our global scholars comes back to New York at least once a quarter, most more frequently than that, but they're based in North America, South America, Western and Eastern Europe, Asia, some countries in Africa, around the world. We have a China program, we have our Middle East program, et cetera, et cetera. And so we bring in that global perspective. I'll also say in the cohort last year, my class was 2/3, I think, international students from outside the United States. So when we talked about mining, I had a student there from Congo who had worked in that industry. That adds a richness. You talk about bringing your own experiences to class and your own interests. We had a great discussion, and there were a lot of other people add to that. I hope that answers your question.
I can add one thing to that, because I think you asked about the climate conference coming up in the Middle East. I also attend the COP every year. The COP is the conference of the parties. If you don't know, it's the climate conference every year is what the COP that we're talking about. There's lots of COPs, but this one is the climate conference. And it's going to be held in the Middle East this year to some controversy, because the Middle East is known as an oil-producing region. But we will have a strong presence there among the faculty and some students. And I think it's worth mentioning that we're building some classwork and coursework here in New York that will take place throughout the fall semester to help students understand what goes on at a COP, how the negotiations have gone and are going. And then those of us who have the opportunity to go, when we come back, we always give talks and have panels. And so we try to, last year I also taught on Zoom from Egypt while I was at the COP to my class. So we really try to bring, when we can't bring the whole class with us, we bring the experience to the classroom to the degree we can. And so I think it's really beneficial to this program and to Columbia in general when we have so many engaged faculty members that are doing a lot more than teaching. They're walking the talk and working on their various projects. And then when we come to the classroom, we share what we're working on. So some of that will be really prioritized for the incoming class this fall.
This question is for any of you, but are there any elective classes that you as professors wish you could take, or alternatively you think go hand in hand with the class you teach?
How much time do we have?
Oh, that was for me. Yes, I mean, I think one of the really, strong points of the program is that there are so many electives, and when I see what students are taking, I'm always astounded with it. I mean, when I was a student way back when, I took math, geography, maybe some computer science, economics, but to see all the various electives really to do with how you can actually make use of climate information toward societal use. I couldn't. Don't get me started on that one. Yes, thank you.
Feng, I feel like you might have thoughts on this one.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, is it on? Obviously, if you're asking me, I have a lot of courses. I would love to take most of your courses. I never had a chance to take. But in terms of students, I think, they gravitate toward a few of the key kind of elective courses. For example, climate change law, I think, is a very, very popular course. And some courses on climate policy related. I mean, both of you will be talking about in your core course as well, but there are elective courses in SEPA, and students tend to want to take those. So we offer, in the program, we offer, plenty of climate sciences courses, but some students, I actually forgot to mention earlier question, I have currently a student who graduated from the program who's my PhD student. So when she was a student in the program, she took actually a lot of the electives from the Department of Earth and Environmental Science PhD level courses. So it really, a lot of students have very different interests and very different career paths they are thinking about, and as the previous panel again talked about, you really can design anything you wanted to do. Yeah.
I can take a liberal, just really quick comment. One thing I didn't mention in the 3 buckets earlier is we have a big students program that is outside the classroom opportunities, where we say, hey, this elected official or former elected officials on campus, or this high-level negotiator from a COP is on campus, we're gonna have a seminar series with them. So one example, he's now going to be the US ambassador to India, but when he was here up until 2 weeks ago as a distinguished visiting fellow, Eric Garcetti is the former mayor of Los Angeles. He did a series, which didn't get you course credit, but you could show up for a series of seminars where really talked about decarbonization, mitigation, and adaptation in our cities. And he's part of the World Organization on City Leaders, and he's saying this is how we actually talk through it. And so that was something that was open, and it is brought to our students in our classroom. I brought it to my students in my classroom as SEPA students, et cetera, for, to give access to that. So that's just another, in addition to formal course offerings, it's what you said about just so many opportunities. You're just going to be spoiled for choice.
Yeah, no, all good. Once you enroll in my class and are looking at what else to take, I would say I get a nickel for everyone who enrolls. Anyway, I would say too that I think one of the great features of this program is really trying to wrap its arms around the whole of the challenges that we face. And so I would say too that there's an incredible diversity of electives that are currently offered and that are in development. I know we're working on developing some 1.5 credit courses as well too, to be able to take smaller bites across broader areas. And I think that that's really, really important, because some of the most important things to sort of round out the perspectives and round out what you're going to bring into your careers coming through this program is going to be the ability to look at how these different perspectives, how these different areas of science, how these different areas of expertise intersect with each other. So if you're not sure what to take, then maybe take something that is a little outside of the comfort zone or seems a little adjacent to what you're doing, because that might give you a fresh perspective that really differentiates you in what you're able to do from other folks in the field.
Yeah, I'll just add quickly that I really like the point made over here that electives are one thing, and you get course credit for them, but boy, New York City is its own elective, and there's so much going on, and by being situated here and being taught by this group of people, among others, you will have open doors for you all over the place. And, if I was going to give one piece of advice, I give this advice to my undergraduates all the time, but it also applies to you. If you're coming to New York to study, leave the neighborhood, go see what else is happening in New York. And we have all kinds of ways now in the program to alert you to opportunities and events and speakers and lectures and New York City's, city events that really are available to you, not for credit, but also free, and will give you really tremendous opportunities. I know so many graduate students who come in thinking they're interested in one thing, and then they stumble upon an elective and it changes their whole life and their whole focus. They get turned on to something new, and they're situated in a place where making that shift is possible.
I just want to add one thing. I forgot to mention that we developed a lot of electives you probably already heard earlier. So, for example, students really wanted, many years ago, we didn't have climate justice courses, and now we have, I think, maybe 3 climate justice courses from very different perspective. So that's definitely something, I would, love to take, if I were a student. And the other one is climate communication is another one that's essential, for all of us to learn about the communication skills. Yeah.
Do you want to move on to our next question?
I have a lot of questions. Once again, I'm so sorry. I will actually send out 2 this time because these are, I really want to know more. Thank you all for being, such experts in your field and bringing all this experience and all the leadership that you do bring. I'm really looking forward to that. In your experience, do students get access to do work with you, to do the GRA, to have internships? In your experience, is that something that most students that want it get access to? My second question is, was there a class or a lecture or a person that, I don't know, facilitated your passion for climate research?
I can, so the answer to the first one's yes. There's a tremendous amount of opportunities for direct integration into the work. And so I would say to, talk to the professors if you see someone who's interested. There's really just a very collegial, very open sort of climate, that's duplicative, the climate ecosystem at the climate school, right? And so I think that direct link to the field is really, really important, and especially in a master's program is one of the most important, because that's where you're making connections for what comes next, whether it's further study or whether it's in your career. So that's a hard yes. And actually, yeah, so I mean, really with everyone I'm sitting up here with, sort of through programs, actually, Lisa, I first met you as a guest lecturer for a class I was covering and actually co-teaching with Alix. And we're working together on some FEMA trainings. FEMA now awarded their first training program across the United States for climate change and equity and disaster management. And we're collaborating on that. We have collaboration sort of all up and down with, we had a call yesterday with a large foundation on looking at indexes and so all of these just have tremendous opportunities too, that it's not just, we get to learn from each other in the work that we do, and we invite each other into each other's classes. So, and we also get to learn from all of you and all of the different perspectives that you bring to the field, into the classroom as well too. So,
one thing I'd just encourage you, if you decide to join, but no matter where you end up in your next choice and your next step here, I will say that all of us, so we have formal things that we'll announce, and I'll put out something that says we're looking for someone to work in this. But that is not even the tip of the iceberg of opportunities. So I remember when Dr. Chris Bataille came into our class and talked about how we decarbonize heavy industry. He's Canadian, he works with the oil sands. How do we actually think about keeping the lights on while going to net zero as rapidly as possible? And afterwards, I had all these students that came up to me saying, oh my gosh, he's amazing. How do we work with him? And he is amazing, and you should work with him because he's great. Even if you don't like industry, you should just work with him. He's inspiring. But I was like, hey, it's great you'll talk to me, and I will absolutely send an email to break the ice for you to talk to him. But he came to this class because he wants to talk to you. You go to him and you say you have interest and you're willing to just put in some work. If it's 5 hours, 10 hours, 20 hours, we can start GRAs mid-semester. We don't have to start them on the first day of the semester. You come in now, great, we'll put you as a casual student worker. And you'll get paid to do work on this thing, and you don't need to know a lot about it now. We're here at a university because we want to help you to explore these possibilities. That drives us, or we wouldn't be here, we'd be doing something else. So don't be shy about it, and don't think that just because you can't find it online or in a formal announcement, you should look for those too. But create those opportunities, ask about them, just say, hey, I'm interested, is there something I could do? and the door's open. The doors are already open. You just don't know that day one. You'll find it out real quick.
If I could just take that point one step further, like behind the curtain at NCDP, I know we present this very fully comprehensive, well-oiled machine, like a Ferrari of administrative processes, right? But really, it's there's a lot of demand for the work. It's very dynamic. And it's just to say that I can't tell you how many times like a new project's coming on board and it's like, okay, we got to figure out how to do this. And then the student's like, can I talk to you about career stuff? I'm like, you want to work with us? Like, to Melissa's point, absolutely do that. The formal stuff is great. That's the stuff that we have the time to sort of think through and put out there. But as she mentioned, it's the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot of action going on, and we're doing everything we can to make it as more planned and formal, but there's also something to be said. If you see something that's interesting, go for it. And if the timing's not right, keep checking in, because even on our end, like the world changes in terms of what we have going on every couple of months, and the door's always open. Figuratively, literally, we've got to get another key.
Yeah, and if I can just add, that it's really broad. I mean, the GRA, so at the beginning of the year, what happens is that the climate school will send out to all of the IRI and other units, calls for, do you want to host someone? Are you interested in having a climate society student working with you? So it's not just from the faculty; it's really across. And so there's a broad cross section of projects. So for you to choose from.
Yeah, I just want to add also, I think you asked, whether a lot of people do that. I think that, obviously the opportunities are limited, and DRAs are not, not everyone want to do it or wanted to do it and can get it. So there are some, selection process going on, matching, interest with the projects. So some students actually, I wanted to also make it clear, some students choose not to pursue a formal kind of research opportunity because the course load is very heavy in the program. So I'm sure you heard from the student panel already that some of them choose to do it, some didn't. And but even if you don't have a formal DRA, GRA, or internship during the semesters, it doesn't mean you don't have research experience. You are still involved in a lot of research during the courseworks, the group projects. So there are a lot of opportunities for you to develop the research skill. And I think in terms of what everyone else have said, that is absolutely true. That obviously you have your advisors, right? Your advisor will give you some advice if you want to ask them, how do I find out, the opportunities out there? But going to events is really a great way to find out, because you go to events and we may not even realize people are doing this and that, and you go there and you heard something exciting, you're really passionate about, and then go to talk to the speaker and ask them, could I work for you? Right? I mean, people would love that.
Yeah, I would just add that I encounter all the time people, executives or leaders in private sector or nonprofit sector who contact me and say, do you have any students who could come work for me? They're looking for experts. They're looking for young people who have skills in this area, and they don't know how to find you. So that's also a little bit, behind the curtain. But I have all kinds of stories of examples of students who, then I'll send out an announcement to my class, so-and-so is looking for somebody, and that connection gets made. The student can go on to a long-term career based on that connection. So you get plugged in all kinds of ways that you're not even seeing when you're here.
Hello, well, thank you for sharing all this knowledge. I wanted to ask, since the main climate change agreement that we have is the Paris Agreement, I would like to know if there's a position like faculty or every unit has its own position around the Paris Agreement, especially around the 2 degrees, and also around other agreements that are also multilateral, like the Sendai framework, for example, or the Sustainable Development Agenda. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I teach all of those things. I don't have a position, and I sort of won't take one. But what I will do is teach them what they are, when they came about, by who, for what purpose, what we see analytically as strengths of these various institutions and global agreements, how global agreements and multilateral environmental agreements are created, what the shortcomings are of that instrument, how these tools have been used, will be used, where the gaps are, and then I invite my students to have their own positions on that and to interact with each other to analyze evidence-based analysis about the effectiveness of those tools.
And in mitigation, we do something very similar. So we talk about the agreements, we talk about 2 degrees, 1.5, what is needed if you say, okay, that's the limit, we are hitting it. What does that mean? What does that mean for a decision this decade, next decade, the decade after? In different parts of the world, in different circumstances, in cities and rural areas, like what does it mean? And then what happens in terms of trade-offs as you move from 1.5 to 1.6 to 1.7 to 2, these types of things, and what is the uncertainty around that? So we talk through all of that. I will say, as the center and then also in my class, it's not positions, it's not saying good or bad, it's understanding the implications. I think you were saying approach to it and how we teach it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We talked through a lot of what you were saying about the different roles that different actors have in the entire system. So what is the point of the Conference of the Parties? What happens there? What happens in the run-up to them? What are the obvious and non-obvious benefits or trade-offs or risks associated with that kind of an approach? How does it complement regional approaches, country-level approaches, in the US state and city level approaches? How does it all play together? And what are the different actors that are involved and at what steps, so that you understand a bit more about this black box, or at least what I think can look like a black box when you're not involved in it.
Yeah, maybe if I can just add to that, in terms of international institutions, we put a lot of emphasis on, well, what roles are they playing, particularly on the climate side. What is the World Meteorological Organization doing? How does it fit into development of climate services? What is the World Climate Research Program doing? How do these global institutions, how are they working toward it, and how is what we do connected with what they do? How do the various pieces work together? How does academia work with these global institutions toward this goal?
I would add, in a lot of the disaster-related courses, we actually don't spend that much time on it, because the elevation that we're working at is usually at the institutional and the community level. And these agreements sort of up in the stratosphere, they sort of frame uncertainty, they sort of maybe create shared values that are sort of trickle into what we do, but in terms of the actual doctrine and the procedures and the underlying sort of dynamics between communities, they're kind of on the periphery of all of that. So I would just say that, so that in some of the courses you'll get throughout the program, you'll really spend a lot of time talking about the international implications and all of the various aspects of that. And in other courses, you sort of get kind of below the clouds on that and into what's going on, and how these agreements do play into, okay, how can we frame the uncertainty going down the road? But I should say that we make, in the course that I teach, we do mention these as international frameworks, but we probably spend, well, it's a 16-week, I think we cover them in one of the weeks for doing it, because the bulk of the course is more focused on some of the community and some of the other aspects for it as well, too. And I think that's important to note, because especially in an environment, these international agreements are sort of looked at and sort of grabbed onto as something, but they don't necessarily cascade into the type of meaningful action that we hope that they do sort of through and through. And so we sort of take a look at where those connection points are strong up to those international frameworks and where they're much more tenuous or where they're kind of broken, and then what are the things that are actually driving what's getting done and kind of below the surface.
Okay, so I think we are at time now. So I just want to thank our panel and our faculty for joining us. Please join me in thanking them. And then I believe we are breaking for lunch now, correct? Okay, all right, I'll let you take over.
I just have some, so yes, you guys are rock stars. You sat through this entire morning, and I just want to note that we do absolutely have coffee if anybody needs also a caffeine moment outside too. So there is lunch served. We have a variety of different sandwich options. Please help yourselves. And then we're done in this space for the remainder of the day. So some of you might be concluding with lunch, and then some of you are coming with me to Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory, which is super exciting. Very excited about that. But we'll be departing from the lunch space to head downstairs and pick up some shuttles to go up. So anyways, thank you, everybody. If you exit out these doors, the lunch is served to the left. Yeah, to the left. Yeah.